All right, hello Year 12. We are now looking at part 2, which begins with this image on page 165 in your novels. Now, in your novels, you will have, which is not in this one, but there is a quote, and it says, it's from the newspaper article, a newspaper article in the paper Pomerania from Germany in the mid-1930s, and it says, Mickey Mouse is the most miserable ideal ever revealed. Healthy emotions tell every independent young man and every honourable youth that the dirty and filthy covered vermin, the greatest bacteria carrier in the animal kingdom, cannot be the ideal type of animal. Away with Jewish brutalization of the people, down with Mickey Mouse, wear the swastika cross. Now that extracts on page 164 of your novel, and that's an example of the Nazi propaganda and the way in which they portrayed the Jews as mice who were not in fact great, and Mickey Mouse would never be a desirable animal and should never be looked up by children because he is in fact, and they are in fact, vermin, the lowest form of life, and deserve, in the eyes of Nazis, to be eradicated. Then on the next page over, which is 165, which is this one in your novel, you've got this picture, and he's dedicated this book for Richieu and for Naja, and Dashiell in ours, which I believe are his own children. And this is one of those rare images or photographs in the novel, and it stands out because there's only 3 times, and I think this is the second one. And it's an image of the innocent and the young Richieu, you know, and this young boy that Art Spiegelman himself has competed with. It's the ghost of a man that could have been, that Art has to compete with every day for the rest of his life, for some reason, against this perfect child who was never an adult and who won't be remembered for the tantrums and anything else wrong that he might have ever done, but only for this beautiful young boy that he was and what he could have been. And despite the fact that Art feels he's been in competition with him, he has taken the time and dedicated this book to him, you know, which shows his love. And that innocent image is then contrasted with this one. In our book, we have a second image up here on page 166, which is an overview of Auschwitz camp. And then inside of it, it's got an inset of the Catskills Mountains and New York, showing the journey between that Art has to take to see Vladek, who is staying out of New York City, and he has to go and visit him. But we've got this image here, and he said that, and here where my troubles began, from Mauschwitz to the Catskills and beyond. So playing on the word Auschwitz, but Catskills on the mountains, but it also could be cats kill, and cats as in cats have lots of skills. There are a few different ideas there that you could have a think about why he's used that particular wording and what it might mean. And then we've got chapter 1, Mauschwitz, and we've got them stripped of their identities now. They're inside the camp behind the barbed wire. They lack their own identity. They instead have been given a number, a pair of pajamas that has a gold star on it, and that defines who they are. All right, and the beginning of part 2 is, he's writing this after the success of part 1, after it's been published, because originally Mouse, or the Complete Mouse, which is parts 1 and part 2, that's the final product. That's what we're seeing in our novel. But how it was published as a serial, which means in parts, in the magazine Raw, I think, over many years, and then finally was put together in the book. And this is written after the first part has been published, and it has received kind of critical acclaim. It's seem to be very popular, and Art's kind of later on struggling to deal with that, and he doesn't know really how to deal with that, and whether the attention he's receiving is he's worthy of it, or what he's contributed is valuable, etc. And it just shows, you know, all his insecurities in dealing with that. But anyway, getting back to this, we've got a number of drawings of different animals here, and we see that Art is trying to figure out how he should represent Francois, his wife, who is French, and the difficulty of representing a race in this story. And this is part of the meta-narrative. This is him writing the book and showing the struggle of writing the book and trying to come up with characters or the appropriate image of a character to suit a race or a people within his story. And it shows him trying to mediate his father's identity with his own experience. He's trying to figure out where they fit in and who he is, and he's asking Francois how should she be drawn, and she suggested, you know, a bunny rabbit, and they're debating, and that's why we've got these different drawings. But it's just the idea of experimentation and trying to figure out how the best way to present your story and explore that story in the most accurate way possible. All right, and then we go moving on here, and he says, you know, you should have married what's her name, or no, sorry, this is Francois saying this. You should have married what's her name, the girl you were seeing when we first met. Sandra? Yes, then you could have just drawn mice, no problem. So she's getting cranky at him because he's saying that she needs to draw her differently. He needs to draw her differently, but he doesn't know how to. He says, come on, I just dated her to get over my prejudice against middle-class New York Jewish women. So even Jews can show prejudice themselves. They're not immune from being prejudiced against other people. So you know, that doesn't make him racist, but he's showing some form of prejudice towards women within his social circles. And then we've got, hurry, your father just phoned. He's had a heart attack. What? Oh no. He left this number to call. We just saw him last week on the way up to the bungalow. We stopped at the Catskills. He looked fine. And he rings him. And they've decided they've got to go visit him. What a pity you just got up here. So they've had to leave where they were, which was on holiday with their friends, and they've had to go to the Catskills where Vladek is to help him because he's unwell. And this is this physical journey in the car is part of the meta-narrative. He's really reflecting on what it's like to write and whether what he's doing is the right thing, and if he is allowed to make a contribution to the Holocaust literature, which means, what that means is all the books that tell a story about the Holocaust, everything from Night to the museum that we visited on camp, to the Holocaust Museum in the United States, to all the other written tales of survivors and historical narratives, etc. Is his graphic novel contribution valuable? Has he added to it, enhanced? You know, he's constantly battling with this question himself. And he says here, depressed again, he was just thinking about my book. It's so presumptuous of me, and this emphasis on this word in bold. I mean, I can't even make any sense out of my relationship with my father. How am I supposed to make any sense out of Auschwitz, of the Holocaust? So even though he's trying to do that with his book, he thinks, like, gosh, I'm an idiot. Like, why would I think that I could make sense of it? I'm just trying to grapple with it with this book, but why did I think that I could make sense of it? And he said, when I was a kid, I used to think about which of my parents I'd let the Nazis take to the ovens if I could only save one of them. Usually I save my mother. Do you think that's normal? And she said, nobody's normal. And so this idea of normality is a question that he's always wondering about and constantly coming back to. And he says, I wonder if Richieu and I would get along if he was still alive. He says, your brother, my ghost brother, since he got killed before I was born, he was only 5 or 6. After the war, my parents traced down the vaguest rumors and went to the orphanages all over Europe. They couldn't believe he was dead. I didn't think about him much when I was growing up. He was mainly a large, blurry photograph hanging in my parents' bedroom. I thought that was a picture of you, though it didn't look like you. That's the point. They didn't need photos of me in their room. I was alive. The photo never threw tantrums or got in any kind of trouble. It was an ideal kid, and I was a pain in the ass. I couldn't compete. And again, we've got this idea of a competition. He's in competition with his dead brother. He's in competition with his father and the pain that he can feel. And he says, they didn't talk about Richieu, but that photo was a kind of reproach. He'd have become a doctor and married a wealthy Jewish girl. The creep. But at least we could have made him go deal with Vladek. It's spooky having sibling rivalry with a snapshot. And that's a very relevant quote, I think, to a number of questions. So I'd definitely be making note of this passage. And it's part of a meta-narrative, reflecting on the experience of writing and what trying to retell this Holocaust story has revealed for him. And yeah, it's sad that he is in competition with the photo, but that's how he feels. And then we've got this, touching on this idea of guilt here. I never felt guilty about Richieu, but I did have nightmares about SS men coming into my class and dragging all us Jewish kids away. Don't get me wrong, I wasn't obsessed with this stuff. It's just that sometimes I'd fantasize Cyclone B coming out of our shower instead of water. So you can see that he's been deeply traumatized by this experience, even though he says, don't get me wrong, I wasn't obsessed. The fact that that's a concern that he had, or even a nightmare that he had, tells us maybe that he knew too much, and that he wasn't helped in how to deal with that. I know this is insane, but I somehow wish I had been in Auschwitz with my parents so I could really know what they lived through. I guess it's some kind of guilt about having had an easier life than they did. You know, and is it fair that he thinks that he should have to feel, have experienced that, to understand them and what they went through? This is quite sad, and just kind of an interesting point that I think you need to spend a little bit of time thinking about this spread and what he's trying to say and what he's trying to grapple with. I guess it's some kind of guilt about having had an easier life than them. And this, I wish I had been in Auschwitz with my parents. You know, really, really have a think about that. Why does he wish that? What does he really want to understand, or does he want this just to be an authentic text? I'm not sure. I feel so inadequate trying to reconstruct a reality that was worse than my darkest dreams. And this is feeding into, I think, his own, self-esteem issues and his struggle to feel like the contribution he's making is worthwhile, and whether he is in fact a valid person to make a contribution to this literature, this narrative of the Holocaust. And trying to do it as a comic strip, I guess I bit off more than I can chew. Maybe I ought to forget the whole thing. And he says, there's so much I'll never be able to understand or visualize. I mean, reality is too complex for comics. Which, this is a good one here, a very good quote. So much has to be left out or distorted. And she says, just keep it honest, honey. But you could also, the counter argument to that is that so much can be conveyed in images that cannot be conveyed in words, and his drawings are able to do that. So this quote here in this spread would come about if you're talking about how does the graphic novel structure add to the Holocaust narrative or literature, and whether it's a valid way to write about and explore the Holocaust experience, if the graphic novel is worthy. And I think it is, but that's up to you what you think, but you need to justify what you think, why you think it, and you need to have some evidence from the text to show the debate that's going on for Ardi as to whether or not what he's doing is valid. All right, and then he arrives at the Catskills and he goes, "You see how it is now, Artie. She took my money and she ran away. Oi, how could she do it? Leave me, such a sick man like me, alone." So Marla has abandoned him and has taken his money, seemingly. I haven't read enough about this to know any more than that, so we'll just leave that one there. It says, "Look how nice I made for you a bed. For the whole summer, you can be comfortable here. Hey, we're just staying for a few days, Pop." He needs to remind him that they're not there for the long haul. It's just for a short while. And this here, I just want to take a step back for a moment. This is what's called breaking the fourth wall, which means it's stepping out again. It's another level. And this dialogue that they've had, did this really ever happen? No, I don't think so, because what he says is, "See what I mean? In real life, you'd never have let me talk this long without interrupting." He couldn't have had this whole dialogue with her without her talking. He's just had to make it up to kind of show his own internal mental struggle with this writing and drawing and how he's trying to communicate his father's story. So that's what's called breaking the fourth wall. You could talk about that. And if you want to learn a bit more about that, just Google that. All right. And then we'll skip a couple of pages forward. And we've got the kind of frustration and anger of Vladek here, who is kind of upset and angry about Marla leaving him, and he's saying, "But this she can't do. She needs my signature. Artie, what do you do?" "I'm just lighting my cigarette." And he's, this shows his confusion. You've got the idea of the jewel heads there. Down here, "Only to light the oven I use them. These wood matches I have to buy. The paper matches I can have free from the lobby of the Pines Hotel." And this is again him always trying to save a buck and avoid spending it where he can and conserve his funds for a rainy day, which seemingly will never occur, and he's going to have to leave the money behind when he passes, but he's always saving just in case. It's like he's afraid always that the Holocaust might be around the corner at any moment, and he needs to be as resourceful as he can in order to protect himself and his family. But that incident, this moment with the matches, is one point you need to probably annotate here and make sure that you're aware of, as the characterization of who Vladek is, why he is, and what he believes about could possibly happen to him. That the Holocaust could happen again. So he needs to continue to be resourceful and frugal and save and save and save. And then at the bottom of the next spread, and it says, "A nurse, it costs money. You think your father spends money so easy? Poor Marla. One time I went to the supermarket with her. She had to erase a hairbrush from the bill because he wouldn't pay for her personal items. How could a couple live like that?" And so I've just got a sticky note there about like the family relationship, the fractured relationship that's going on, and how difficult Vladek is as a person, and how we need to be sympathetic maybe to some of the other characters in the novel because of the way that he is, but also realize that Art's writing from his own perspective, and he hasn't had the most positive relationship with his father, and that possibly colors the way that he presents him in this novel. All right, and then we've got here Vladek is kind of hijacking the moment with a bit of a guilt trip about what they need to do. And he says, "Maybe, but lots of the people up here are survivors, like those carps. If they're whacked up, it's in a different way from Vladek." So he's saying that everybody has their struggles that they deal with after the Holocaust, but Vladek is a special case, and he thinks he's kind of more extreme than anybody else. And his story suggests maybe that's true, but who knows? it's just one story, and we must always remember that it's not what everybody would be like, but Vladek's is one story of a survivor. And he says, God, if it wasn't so pathetic, it'd be kind of funny. And that is, she's talking about the fact that since gas is included in their rent, he leaves a burner little all day to save on matches, which in fact the matches are so much cheaper than the gas, but he just doesn't have to pay for that as part of his rent. So he thinks it's okay to waste it. So it's an interesting dynamic, and they're saying, you know, it's pathetic. It's also sad and unnerving and a bit upsetting maybe for them. So, and then we've got the narration after a few tense hours later, and we've got again Vladek is blaming Art for the problems he's having. You did this. It's your fault that I've done this. And him getting angry and calling him lazy, and every job we should make so as to do it right away. And you know, he just constantly puts him down and makes him feel belittled and worthless because he's not living up to this kind of ridiculous standard that Vladek sets for him, which is unfair and explains probably why the two of them are the way they are. All right, and now this is page 184 in your novel. Got this moment down here, and it's kind of a little moment where Vladek tries to reach out to his son and bridge that gap and bring them back together again. But Artie shuts him down and pushes him away because he's frustrated and angry at him, and so refuses to kind of forgive him and let him in. And then because unless it's about the book or the story, he doesn't really want to hear about it. He just makes him go back to it. He says, well, what happened when you and Mum arrived there and were separated? So we step back, we see the change in panel, back into the other story. And then back out again. But you need to understand, never Anya and I were separated. No. And we've gone back and forward between these panels here. And they were together even when they weren't together, showing kind of the strength and bond of their relationship, and that when they were, what's the word he uses? It says something like, never we were separated, but the war put us apart. So they were forcibly taken apart. They had no choice in the matter. They were simply had to do what they did because they were made to by these kind of vicious guards and men. And shut up Yids, which is an offensive term for Jews. And it's also very simple, but when it says shut up Yids to the bathhouse quick, it's showing the very potential danger of that moment and what could have been the crematorium, which other people thought was the bathhouse when they were going in. All right, and then we've got this, I think it's a particularly powerful panel. If you just take the time to have a look at these images, you've got them running after their showers, they're dressed in pajamas, the brutality of the guards, and these are the Poles treating them that way. They're stripping them of their identity even further. They no longer have their clothes, none of their belongings, and their identities are taken away, and they are given instead of a number. They registered us, and they took from us our names, and here they put me my number. We've got the overlay of that, and his interjection of present day over the top of the historical narrative points to the significance of that moment and the power of what it means when you take away who a person is and you strip them of everything they are and instead define them as a number. You make them less human, you make them vermin. So you've got him with human hands, but a mouse-like face. All right, and then we've got All around was a smell so terrible I can't explain. Swedish, so like rubber burning and fat. And that's the bodies burning in the crematorium for those who might have missed that one. And, you know, that smell, the smoke permeates camp life. It always hangs over them. It's something they can never escape. And you see that down here in that image, like it's kind of an omnipresent smoke. And he's talking about the fact that Abraham, who was the nephew of Mandelbaum, I didn't see again. I think he came out the chimney. And he says the Germans didn't need them, so they finished also in Auschwitz. And so he's talking about the people that betrayed him, I think. And I think they didn't even mean it. Oh, they didn't realize that they had betrayed him, because they didn't know that the guards who were trying to move them, this is when they were being smuggled back earlier, and we had the train station image, when they were being smuggled, that the smugglers could speak Yiddish, so they knew what the Jews were saying to each other and manipulated them accordingly. All right, we've got the close-up here of the of his number, and it says it ends with 13. The age a Jewish boy becomes a man. And look, added together the totals of 18. That's Chai, the Hebrew number of life. And so he sees this kind of as a symbol for hope. And we see that despite the kind of awful situation that he is looking for a moment of hope and potential and possibility. And you see that his change of face and demeanor as he starts to kind of feel rejuvenated or reinvigorated by this hope for what could be. And then we move on, and we've got this larger panel, and this is a rare, I don't recall seeing any other panel kind of drawn in a similar light. But now it was Auschwitz. Mandelbaum was a mess, and he used to be this wealthy man, and now you've got these little parts of text here narrating how he's being kind of desecrated from the person that he was, and he's become this prisoner with no shoe, pants too big. He always has to walk around holding on to it. So have a little read of that, and have a look about how, think about how people, didn't matter who you were as a Jew, the wealthiest to the very poorest, you know, could be undone by the Nazis, and you were reduced to nothing. But we see that Vladek, this is one person that who exists kind of before for him, and he helps him and looks after him, not necessarily in that moment for anything in return. And he says, you know, he needs a spoon and he needs a belt and all sorts of other things. So when Vladek is saved by one of the guards a little bit later on, because he knows the language and he's able to teach him as requested, he then takes some of the goods that he obtains and he shares them with Mandelbaum and helps him to survive for some part. He says he was so happy with this, and the capo knew Mandelbaum was my friend, so left him alone. How long I kept him, but a few days later the Germans chose him to take away to work. Nobody could help this, so it was finished with Mandelbaum. I never saw him more again. And you know, the finality of that moment and kind of the simplistic nature of that narration or that text shows how easily bonds were broken and lost in the Holocaust. You just had to move on. That's all that you could do. And he says here, what have we got? Let's keep going down. I'm just looking through my book. I think I've skipped a few pages. Yep. Got the racism here. You Jew, you've only been here a few days and you're ready to do business. This reputation that the Jews have of always being kind of out to get their own. And this carries on, and he says, they wanted only to finish everyone out. It was very hard work and very little food. Maybe they kicked and hit him. And he's talking about Mandelbaum here, who was taken away to work because he couldn't work fast enough. Or maybe he got sick, so they put him first in the hospital and then in the oven. You see how they did, and I had it still. Happy there, for me, it was not yet the end. And he kind of makes up a story for how he thinks Mandelbaum's life might have ended, suggesting all these alternatives. But basically it touches on all the ways in which the Nazis destroyed the lives of the Jews and systematically took them apart, with things like throwing their hat and telling him to go and fetch it, or just the inhumanity of these other things by not feeding them, so starving them to death, them going to hospital and becoming very ill, and obviously being of no use then as workers, so being sent to the ovens. And then again, you've got Vladek being cheap here, and it's a bit of a characterization of who he is. And that's how the chapter ends on that. And there's this one kind of odd moment where he's kind to another lady that's playing bingo, and he gives her his card, and it's kind of one little moment of kindness that he shows in an otherwise present day story in which he is not a very kind person to the people around him, especially the people that love him. All right, I'm going to leave it off there. The next one is Auschwitz Time Flies, but I'm not going to do that one for the moment, so check back in later in January and I'll have done one then. All right, happy listening, keep annotating yourselves, and I'll see you back at school.